Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Tony's Sleep Journal and Sleep Hacks. This is episode 46, and I'm really excited to have a special guest on here, Rochelle Johnson Greer. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before I ask you to introduce yourself, I want to ask you, because this podcast is about sleep, how did you sleep last night? How are you sleeping?
Well, I was up trying to answer emails until well past midnight.
Yeah.
And then sadly, my alarm went off at 5:45, at which point I sadly hit snooze and then hit snooze again, and then was late for my 6 a.m. meeting. So I don't know about the sleep part. I feel like I slept fine, I feel like I didn't sleep enough.
I think we all feel that way, especially when it's so busy and hectic.
Yeah,
Could you
absolutely.
please really kind of introduce yourself? To people that don't know you. I know you very well, but there's people out there, and tell us about yourself and your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a former Amazonian. I was there for about 8 years. So I don't know what that is in working like dog years, right? If you work at Amazon, do you get like credit for more years or something? But when I was there, I was in operations roles. So I have a really strong sense of kind of what Amazon is doing on the back end,
Yeah.
which can be a little bit confusing for some folks. And then I was also in compliance, and one of my more notable roles in compliance was managing private brands, compliance and quality. So working with all kinds of different products on Amazon Basics, and then on the Pinzon brand, we actually did a lot of home textiles and bedding and all kinds of stuff in that space. All of it kind of lower end, except for we actually did a really gorgeous product line for these amazing I don't know if you're aware of the manufacturer, but I think they were called Downlight. And they're these absolutely amazing down comforter thingies. And Amazon was like, these do not move fast enough. But they were amazing. I absolutely loved them. The performance was so cool.
Wow.
So it was a really great job. You got to do a lot of things, got to learn a lot of things. And then they would do things like, all right, so we're doing down comforters. You need to know what the testing requirements are.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay. so you end up like going, all right, so Google, what testing requirements are there for down comforters? And then it takes you to, the various testing labs. We ended up bringing in the guys from the testing company that does most of these things. They brought in these samples. It was so cool. And so then, we would had like 3 hours or so with them going over it. And so they explained to us all of the various aspects of what they test and how they test. And that's literally how we did our jobs at Amazon. Is they didn't really bring on a lot of experts at that time. They brought all along a lot of like MBAs like me. Yeah. And they were like, all right, learn it, figure it out. And we were like, okay.
Let me ask you this. And it's funny you mentioned Downlight, because I just did a Zoom chat with them the other day. We were entering into a licensing agreement to bring some of their brand.
They were a really great supplier. They were really easy to work with.
Yeah, they're really good. It's so different. And I mentioned this on LinkedIn the other day, when you're working with North American suppliers versus offshore. It's just the world of difference.
Yeah.
But one of my first questions I wanted to ask you is that, do you feel if a new seller would come on and try Amazon, that they would be as successful now as opposed to like 5 years ago?
I think it depends on what you mean by successful. So when people think of successful, especially when they think of successful like 5 years ago, they're thinking about people who are able to go on Alibaba and buy a bunch of junk and then put it on Amazon, list the junk, and then sell the junk at a significant markup. And that's basically what a lot of people were being trained to do 5 years ago. And as a result, customers were pretty annoyed because they were getting a bunch of junk. And it was all the trainings were go on Alibaba, buy these things, sell them here. Most of them were not legally sold in the US. They didn't have the correct labelings and markings. They probably weren't safe to sell in the US. There were a lot of items that even we ran into that just literally weren't safe, weren't compliant for the US. The whole thing was a mess. So in terms of, is it easier now than it was or harder now than it was? I would say no, you just actually have to run a business properly now. You can't cheat rampantly like people did 5 years ago. So I think it actually is around the same amount of effort as it would be to create a brand today, where you actually have to look at your supplier. You have to make sure you're legally compliant. You have to actually be a real business to get an account now. Like there are just so many things that you could cheat on Amazon 5 years ago. So to me, I kind of find the concept of, oh, is it harder now? Like, no, it's where it should be now.
Yeah.
And people 5 years ago were just being illegal.
It was really the Wild West where you could just
Yeah.
list anything and it would sell, literally something.
Yeah, and anything would sell. And it was a huge, in my opinion, a huge mistake of Amazon's to allow that to happen, because it really damaged their brand. There were a lot of people who said that Amazon turned into a flea market. That they were really upset about all of the situations with, products that had great reviews that turned out to be junk. I think that Amazon has learned that you can't just invite everyone on the platform and that be a good thing.
Yeah. Because we have a lot of Canadian people that watch this podcast, and you may have some clients like based in Canada. What would you recommend? What kind of advice would you recommend to them, especially in this kind of scenario where we're really in crisis?
Well, the first thing is that I definitely wouldn't shy away from the US market right now. In general, the US market is going to just get bigger and bigger throughout the year. Even with the concerns that people have about a recession or even a depression, with how high the unemployment rate is, the fact is that e-commerce is still going to be just fine. And in fact, I think better than ever. The numbers here are absolutely overwhelming in terms of the pandemic. Yesterday, I think it was over 70,000 people who were confirmed coronavirus cases in one day. And that's been happening now for weeks, where it's in the 50s and the 60s and the 70,000. So what, next week are going to be the 80,000, something like that. So people who are in any way concerned for their health or their family's health are avoiding the rest of the country like a plague, because it literally is. And so you end up buying a lot more on Amazon. And there are some people who are buying more on websites, who are trying to go on websites and so on. But what's really happened is a lot of the online apps have gone up. Instacart, Grubhub, Uber Eats, Amazon, pretty much anything where people can buy things online and have it show up to their door is doing really well. Because if there's anything that the pandemic has taught us, it's that our fellow human beings are full of germs and we don't want to be around them. So in terms of like anyone who's outside the country trying to figure out what to do here, absolutely just, don't be afraid of that part of things. It's going to be even bigger. We actually just got confirmation yesterday from a client that 2 members of their warehouse staff tested positive for COVID-19.
Wow.
And they said, it'll be slow for a week or 2, but we're hiring someone else to replace them. And I was just like, you're not closing down, you're not cleaning, nothing? Okay, alrighty then. So that's the kind of situation that we're in here. And
Yeah.
so if you're worried about a 3PL shutting down, don't be, because they won't. So that's
They're an essential worker.
yeah. So I know that there's a lot of kind of like what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. I can tell you what's not going to happen, and it's that the economy is not going to get shut down for sure. And even if things do have an increase in lockdowns, that means that e-commerce is going to do well. E-commerce is going to be more successful. The numbers that Amazon is at right now were where they were kind of planning to be in 3 to 5 years. And so the numbers are just insane, how many people are buying off of Amazon.
Yeah. Are you seeing, and your clients seeing any delays in supply chains or other logistics?
Oh yeah, huge delays. So right now at Amazon alone, going into Amazon US for a small parcel is taking anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks minimum to get checked in. And they're barely getting things checked in by the investigation date. And then for LTL, it's terrible. It's 5, 6 weeks minimum. So if you want something shipped in, you've got to be planning 5, 6 weeks in advance of when you need it, and then ship it in. And it'll sit there for a while. It'll get checked in, and then it'll sit some more, and then it'll finally get transshipped, and then it'll be available. So what we've actually been having all of our clients do is work with 3PLs that are appropriate for them, so that they have backup. Because not only is Amazon super backed up, but we're not even in Q4 yet. And every indication from health experts, every indication from the numbers that we're seeing is that the fall is going to be even worse than the summer in terms of coronavirus cases. So you have the combination of pandemic demand combined with Q4 demand, and everyone's at home. And so even though we have fairly high unemployment, I still expect there to be a pretty solid Q4
Yeah.
because the people who do have jobs are going to be like, let's go shopping.
Yeah. No, no, absolutely. I totally agree. Anything else that you would recommend for people to really be cautious of because we're in such uncertain times?
I would say that if you're trying to make a quick buck on things that help with coronavirus, don't buy it until you've been approved on Amazon. The process that they have is so confusing and so convoluted, and the links don't work half the time,
Mhm.
that it's really incredibly difficult to try to get approved for the COVID store. It actually took me 3 weeks to get approved for the COVID store. I hadn't actually sold PPE before.
Mhm.
And it was one of those things where I was like, oh, it's gonna be super easy. I've done so many ungatings. We're gonna nail this.
Yeah.
Yeah, 3 weeks. 3 weeks. So if you were thinking, oh, I can buy this really great thing and then open an Amazon account and sell a bunch of PPE in the US, I'm gonna make so much money. Don't do that. Wait until you've gotten approved. Like buy a small amount so that you can get approved, because you got to have the
Mhm.
paperwork to get approved. Submit it all and then actually buy a bunch. We had a client who did that, who just kind of went whole hog and was like, hand sanitizer is the wave of the future, and got a bunch of masks and hand sanitizer. And now they're just sitting there while he's waiting to get approved. And every single step, there's something wrong. So they had to pass the pesticide quiz, then they had to pass the topical Zengating, then they had to pass the COVID store, and then it's just
No
very
pleasure, no
annoying.
pain, I guess.
Right. So that was the thing that I would say, if you're trying to find a, get rich quick during coronavirus kind
Yeah.
of thing, I would just suggest not focusing on that until you've got a solid supply chain in order, and then applying to Amazon for it, but not before. And then the other thing that we're seeing that's
Yeah.
kind of interesting is there's a lot of challenges with global supply chains right now, because other countries are shutting down in response to issues.
Yeah.
So there are multiple situations where our suppliers have either shut down in China or gone to half staff. And so delays, huge delays with shipments.
Mhm.
One client can't finish production run here in the States because all of his bottles are made in China, and his bottle supplier is backed up until September. Another client had an entire container of goods just sitting at port in Italy, just sitting there for a month. I couldn't get them in. So that's the biggest thing that we're seeing is there's a lot of global supply chain problems right now.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say that it's, super problematic. It's just that you need to be planning for that, and the fact that it's just going to cost more to do business this year.
Mhm. What's the best way for people to contact you, and what type of services do you really offer? Like, if somebody's starting out, they're not sure if it's going to be the right fit.
Yeah, so we do two different types of services. The first is kind of ad hoc or hourly service, more consultative, and the second are various types of retainer plans. So the consultative side is something that you're pretty familiar with,
Yeah.
and we basically will get on the phone depending on the situation. So Malia does a lot of our performance issues. I do general strategy and business growth. James does catalogs, which kind of have our areas. And
Hmm.
then you bring whatever the issues are that you have to the meeting. We talk through it, give you advice, give you examples of what we've done in the past, and then you go out and go forth and conquer, right? So it's very much in that sense a consultant relationship where you're
Yeah.
getting advice and you're getting feedback, and then you go and do the things. And then for the retainer side of things, it's the agency model. So working with people, there's a set amount of minimum hours that you get, and then we may choose to do more hours on top of that based on the opportunity that we see, because our retainer model isn't hours for service. It's actually minimum hours to get a retainer plus commission.
Hmm.
And so if we commit more hours, then theoretically we get more commission. And so we kind of see ourselves as a business partner in a lot of ways for our clients, where we'll come to them with, there was one situation where I was speaking to a reporter and I was like, who would be a really great fit? This particular client, and recommended that they talk to this client. So getting our clients into the New York Times. So that was pretty exciting. Or in other cases where we were like, you know what, you're not able to get the kind of traffic that you need by selling on Amazon
Hmm.
and advertising on Amazon. What you need to do is advertise on Instagram and Facebook and drive that to your Amazon storefront, and let's see how it works. And so then we go take care of that for the client, drive the traffic from somewhere else, then see how it goes. It depends on how expensive traffic is on Amazon, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of use the retainer model as a growth approach, where we're saying, okay, so what do you need? How much of it do you need? What's most important for your business? And then how can we help? We also have a couple other retainer plans. One is developing products from scratch. Obviously, that's something that we did before, pretty familiar with. And then the other is handling issues with Amazon. So if someone is facing a lot of takedowns with Amazon,
Yeah.
or they just don't want to worry about it and have someone else take care of it, then we do that. Obviously, I think there's really nothing that an Amazon seller likes less than dealing with seller performance. so,
The
that's
dreaded
something
seller
that,
performance.
right. I think that's something that a lot of folks are just like, you take it. I don't want to deal with it.
Well, you know, just to end this, I want to give a personal testimonial. I think you guys are an awesome boutique agency, and anybody out there who's looking for a personalized level of service will be very happy. And thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. Yes, of course. Anytime.